Welcome to Game Theorem, where we have serious discussions about absurd entertainment.
I am having a stellar day. And not just because I'm legally obligated to say so. Almost as stellar as Spacer's Choice is affordable. Martin Callahan, Spacer's Choice merchant.
Hi.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Kira.
And we're talking about The Outer Worlds today.
Oh my god. We played through this together, and it was amazing.
I am so excited to do this. Now, if you all don't know, Fallout New Vegas is probably one of our favorite games. Mm-hmm. Or at least it was until The Outer Worlds come out. Actually, honestly, I still think I like Fallout New Vegas more.
Just because there's more to it.
But I think maybe Outer Worlds might be my second. Mm-hmm. I'm only just now thinking of like a list in my mind. But, let's just say it's second. And it's made by the same people. It's made by Obsidian. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's such a good game. It's about a year old at this point.
Is it?
Around there. It's many, many months old. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of weird to think about that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we took our sweet time playing it, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
We took it super slowly and savored every moment of it and got everything out of this game. And so we're here today to give you the full documentary, or not documentary, detailed chronology of the Outer Worlds universe. Mm-hmm. All the backstory. Are you ready for that?
Yep.
I'm really excited about it too. Oh, it probably goes, it's probably worth saying this is our first episode that we've recorded since the coronavirus pandemic happened.
Oh, yeah.
So just thought we should acknowledge that in some regards. Stay safe, stay indoors. Mm-hmm. Hope you're all doing well. Good luck to everyone. Mm-hmm. But yeah, let's distract ourselves with Outer Worlds. We don't need to talk about plagues unless they're plagues in the Outer Worlds.
You want to get started?
Yeah, let's get started. You want me to go first?
Yeah, go.
All right. 1896. The Gilded Age was in full swing, defined by the largest wealth inequality ever seen in the history of humanity up to this point, with the select few robber barons ruling the industrializing economy, while the rest of the population of the United States of America toiled in abysmal poverty, wage slavery, and institutionalized racism.
The robber barons and their wealthy sycophants sought to prevent government intervention to preserve the status quo and their economic power. To accomplish that, they funded a state official named William McKinley to run for president of the United States. They secured his nomination for the Republican Party, the only viable political party at the time.
March 4th, 1897. McKinley became president.
Under his administration, the rich continued to become richer and the poor continued to become poorer. Meanwhile, Theodore Roosevelt, a popular progressive figure within the Republican Party, was notorious for advocating trust busting that would release the corporation's stranglehold upon the poor and working classes.
Monopolies used to be known as trusts, by the way. Mm-hmm. McKinley and his corporate donors recognized the threat Roosevelt posed to their administration, and they decided to sideline Roosevelt into the most useless place within the party's administration, the vice presidency.
March 4th, 1901. With Roosevelt as vice president and the popular support he had, McKinley won his re-election easily.
Roosevelt hoped to enact some trust-busting measures, but McKinley never acted on any of them. He intended to never upset his donors' hold on economic and political power.
September 6, 1901. McKinley attended the Pan American Exposition to shake hands with influential people and the press. However, Leon Zolgaz
Scholz, I think. Scholz. Shogos?
I don't know. An anarchist who saw people like McKinley as the oppressors that they were was one of the men who shook McKinley's hand. He took the opportunity to pull out a pistol and shoot to kill McKinley.
He missed. McKinley's administration continued.
And that's the divergent point where we're entering the history of the Outer Worlds.
Much like Fallout, the Outer Worlds is a divergent history. In 1901. And the ramifications for those moments, this is why we had to talk about the prior to the divergence point, so you understood the context of what this meant. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, honestly, people say we're living in the second Gilded Age right now. So when we talk about wealth inequality, this was the first time around, at least for America. Mm-hmm. So the effect that this is going to have without Roosevelt, because that's how Roosevelt got in power when Leon killed McKinley. Mm-hmm. But in the Outer Worlds, he missed.
Mm-hmm. In 1903, Prosper René Blondlot claimed to have discovered a new type of radiation called N-rays. But other physicists denied his results as a wishful fantasy that hoped to replicate the prior discovery of X-rays.
After McKinley's presidency, Roosevelt was forced out of the Republican Party into minor relevance, as the party drifted further from its progressive, abolitionist roots to instead represent corporate investment and unabridged capitalism.
That's interesting.
What?
It's interesting because it means there was no party switch of 1960. And that's also interesting.
1960?
Whatever, I forget what it was.
Where are you talking about?
But when they ended up switching parties, when the Republicans became... when they absorbed the Progressive Party.
No, you don't understand. Like, the Republicans, when they were founded with Lincoln, they were abolitionists. They were the progressives. Mm-hmm. That has since switched. Okay? And here we're seeing the impetus behind that switch. Because at this time...
what happened in real life?
Oh, well, in real life, Roosevelt became the Republican president. And Roosevelt was a progressive, but he was like one of the last Republican progressives. Mm-hmm. And he did a whole bunch of trust-busting measures and got rid of the big corporations like Rockefeller and whatnot. And it would be his nephew, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, who helped redefine the Democratic Party. And in between those two events, there was a progressive party that the Democrats ended up winning while the Republicans started courting Southern racists.
Uh-huh. And when did they end up absorbing the Progressive Party?
1910s, 20s. The Great Depression had a bit to do with this as well. It wasn't a one-day event. This event was the impetus into that event.
But yeah, I get that. But this is interesting because it means the Republicans never courted racists, which makes it interesting that in the Outer Worlds you don't see racism. And I wonder if maybe that's because they never got into racism because they're so focused on corporate power and, being nice to capitalism that they never entertained that and gave it a voice and courted them.
I definitely think it does affect the way the Republican Party turns out, although it does eventually cease to exist. But it goes on to further the eventual power structure, right? Mm-hmm. Because at this time, the Democrats were just complete white supremacists.
Yeah, so...
and it's only by FDR's time that they become the more progressives. Mm-hmm. So in the Outer Worlds timeline, since Roosevelt never got into power, you're right, they probably weren't as aggressive about this. The Republican Party was probably a lot like the Democratic Party is in our real world today, where they are very elite and about money and big business and everything. And... they are also, many of them, racist. However, our current Democratic Party has a progressive wing This Republican Party absolutely does not have that because they got rid of it when they got rid of Roosevelt. However, I do think the fact that Outer Worlds doesn't touch more on racism is actually a failing because it just doesn't really talk about what happened there. Anyway, let's get back to the story.
Yeah. June 28th, 1914. Gavrilo Princip, a Yugoslav nationalist, killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand, leading to declarations of war and coalitions that led to a great war between the countries of Europe and beyond.
Eventually, the United States entered the conflict on the side of the Allied powers against the Central Powers.
1918. When the Allied powers beat the Central Powers into submission, leaders around the world met to draw up a treaty to end the Great War. However, with the United States' involvement, it was not only the Allied and Central Powers negotiating, the largest corporations also had a seat at the table. The resulting treaty set up a higher level of governance called the Earth Directorate that would be in place to prevent future world wars through the arbitration of international and intercorporate disputes.
Which is what I was referring to with how the parties aren't really going to be much of a thing anymore. The people will still be around, but they're going to be under new positions of power. As we have an entirely, like, we can see the divergence already widening. Like, it's already turning out very different. Like, there is no World War II. It's just the one great war. Because that's what World War I was originally known by. Over the next century, both corporations and governments rose and fell. But there was a distinct trend that saw the corporations gaining more influence and power over the years, while the Earth Directorate ensured the governments kept a laissez-faire policy towards the corporations.
While the Earth Directorate allowed the corporations to do what they wanted with only minimal amounts of regulation, in time there ceased to be a distinction between it and the governments, with the Earth Directorate operating as the legitimate governing body, propped up by the corporations, whilst providing a standing military prepared to fight on behalf of corporations that followed the law.
You have any questions about that, Kira?
No, it seems pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, I like to think of it like this. In our world, corporations lobby the government. In this world, the government lobbies the corporations.
Yep.
That's basically it. And it's not like the UN, it's because the UN is toothless. The Earth Directorate is the actual government. In the 21st century, the Earth Directorate, with the aid of many corporations, invented the technology that allowed for space travel. While limited at first, eventually the skip drive was invented, allowing for a method of bypassing the speed of light and making interstellar travel possible. Now, there are two big things of disbelief I have to have with this story. The first is that capitalism will ever give us the equivalent of a warp drive. I just don't think that's ever going to happen under capitalism.
Well, to be fair, the driving factor in that could be like, Earth's resources are literally running out. We need to mine other planets to keep capitalism growing.
Yes, but in the outer worlds, you're basically presuming the idea that the corporations thought ahead of ruining the planet. Look at the real world. Is that happening?
Oh, fair enough. No.
The Outer Worlds presumes that, well, maybe if the corporations already had a stranglehold on power, then they'd have enough foresight. I'm like, I'll suspend my disbelief for that. Because after all, this is a game about space capitalism, so you have to get into space. So I'll deal with it.
Having already ravaged much of the Earth, many corporations began harvesting resources from other planetary bodies and even developing terraforming technology to colonize other star systems.
And that's the second problem I have, the terraforming. But whatever, sci-fi, they figured out a way, right? The Earth Directorate catalogs star systems to sell them to bidding corporations for their own purposes. Each star system would have a number of Earth ministers sent to lobby the corporations in accordance with the law. Now it's overt.
Over the next century, terraforming and interstellar technology accelerated enormously under a new era of capitalism.
That's the most terrifying thing about capitalism, because we're currently living like in-stage capitalism. It's why people like Jeff Bezos want to spend their money on going to space instead of solving world hunger, because it would literally refuel capitalism. It would move the goalpost of where the end of our resources are. It would be horrifying. And in the Outer Worlds, that's what happens. In the early 23rd century, 10 of the largest corporations merged to become subsidiaries of a single multi-corporation called the Halcyon Holdings Corporation, which presided over C&P, Universal Defense Logistics, or UDL, Colway Pharmaceuticals, Spacer's Choice, Rizzo's, Monarch Stellar Industries, MSI, and 4 other corporate members. Together, they bought the rights to the remote Halcyon system, after which their company was named.
Halcyon thus became the first system to be entirely owned by a single corporation, meaning it would only receive a single Earth minister, and it was also the most distant system from Earth.
Imagine that. And
You can obviously see where this is going.
In your entire solar system, you have one representative from the government. One person who's not corporate affiliated. Wow. The Halcyon Holdings Corporation sent preliminary envoys to the Halcyon system to terraform the planets, using existing DNA databases to accelerate mutation and evolution upon the life they instilled, until new species of flora and fauna developed into seemingly natural ecosystems.
The terraforming took many years, but it was ultimately a success. The celestial bodies around Halcyon from closest to furthest were Hephaestus, Tartarus, Terra II, Olympus, and the Charybdis cluster?
Charybdis
Cluster, Typhon, and Eridanus. Olympus and Eridanus were gas giants, and Olympus's largest moon, Terra 1, was the designated location to be the hub of Halcyon, and where the board of the company would live.
They want to live on the largest moon orbiting the largest planet. Compensating much?
Oh my god.
However, some corners had been cut in the terraforming process that resulted in less than ideal results. Why, corporations cutting corners? What? Terra 1's atmosphere became tainted by moderate amounts of sulfur sifting into it from Olympus. While Terra 2 was quite Earth-like, Tartarus and Hephaestus were only livable with life support systems.
In addition, many of the fauna turned out more monstrous than intended, especially on Terra 1. Some of the new species included breadworms, canids, mantisaurs, primals, terrares, raptidons, celtuna, and sprats. 2285. Once Halcyon was prepared to be colonized, they prepared 2 UDL ships, the Hope and the Groundbreaker, each carrying hundreds of thousands of passengers to settle in the Halcyon system. While both contained many poor workers hoping for a new life opportunity, the Groundbreaker also carried the board and important members of the Halcyon Holdings Corporation. And the Hope carried many experts and scientists in various fields. Both ships engaged their skip drives to travel the many light years to the Halcyon system in only a mere 10 years. All of the passengers, save for the ship's crews, were put into cryogenic stasis pods. Such stasis was easily survivable if used only 10 years, but spending much longer in stasis would result in explosive cell death.
A pattern you're really going to notice with these corporations is they always build everything to the bare minimum. We need cryogenic pods that last 10 years. What do we have? Do we have ones that last 11? Nope, they only last 10, not a year more. 2294. After 9 years of travel, the Hope's skip drive malfunctioned, reducing its speed to only just below the speed of light. The rest of their journey would take 26 years for them to arrive in the Halcyon system. Although had they known about time dilation, they would have known that it would only be about 3 years and 8 months for them from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Still, no plans had been made for a skip drive malfunction, something that was considered impossible, and the crew only had enough rations for a 10-year journey, nothing more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some of the stuff you read from the corporations and the logs and the terminals in this game are just downright heartbreaking.
Yeah, I remember reading the part about this woman who said that she had always set aside part of the budget for emergencies and for contingencies, and they were never approved, and they were always scrapped because if you prepare ahead enough, then you won't need money for contingencies.
Yeah, that was a UDL corporate policy. Don't spend money on preventing, or don't spend money on what if a mistake happens. Spend money on preventing the mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So they just had no plan for when the mistake happened.
Mm-hmm. 2295. When the Groundbreaker alone arrived in the Halcyon system, its crew started the settling process, waking people out of stasis. The Hope's disappearance was a huge shock, and the board presumed it lost in transit. The board began assigning jobs, settling people on the planets, setting up machinery, building cities, and starting up mining operations.
Subsidiary companies owned by the Halcyon Holdings Corporation ran the mining operations, overseen by the board. One company, the Hephaestus Mining Company, secured a claim to the entirety of Hephaestus for mining purposes. The company also mined Scylla, the largest asteroid in the Charybdis cluster. Others mined resources from Olympus and Eridanos. Typhon failed to have any resources that interested the board.
Is it written that it has no resources, or did they just ignore it?
It says that it has no interest to the board.
Oh, I see. I wonder if there's going to be any DLC that takes place on the planets that the board didn't bother with.
I mean, who knows? They lie a lot, right?
Mm-hmm. While workers were mostly split between Terra 1 and Terra 2, the board settled on Terra 1 as intended. While many of the corporations that were on the board began expanding in their own interests, they continued to work together and keep competition between them to only what they considered a healthy degree. One of the CEOs on the board occupied the chair, making them the most powerful person in the colony.
What was left of the Groundbreaker became neutral ground as the Earth Directorate military that had come along held onto the rights of the ship itself. They began calling themselves the Mardettes. The Mardettes?
Mm-hmm.
They called themselves the Mardettes and tried to remain independent from the board's control. The board did not need the Groundbreaker nor the troops, however, as UDL provided its own corporate paramilitary force.
Some of the corporations had brought their own genetically engineered livestock, especially CMP, including chickens, woolly cows, and cysty pigs, the last of which were effectively living meat trees with edible tumors that fell off the animals.
It's horrifying, but also brilliant.
Yeah, it's basically manufactured in the way that it's not efficient to have to raise and kill animals. So this was made to be more cost efficient by breeding animals that would constantly produce meat their entire lives.
But you'll notice the cruelty that the pig is still a conscious, sentient being.
And has to grow tumors constantly.
Yeah, trees don't have to worry about that. The pig does.
Yep.
And so it's cruel.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the corporations set up company towns where they controlled everything, and the workers had the most minute power over their own lives as possible. MSI put their company towns exclusively on Monarch, with Amber Heights and Stellar Bay being the most notable.
Over time, conditions for workers steadily worsened, and corporate bureaucracy was used as a tool to squeeze as much work out of the poorest of them as possible, including unethical measures like renting graves.
Literally renting graves. If you run out of money, they kick your corpse out.
Charging for medicine, withholding...
which is just monstrous. Coronavirus pandemic much?
Yeah. Withholding sick leave.
Again.
Mandating extra long shifts,
like literally like back-to-back 16-hour shifts.
the elimination of the weekend and holidays,
The word weekend is literally a foreign word to some people.
lying in all advertisements.
You can't trust anything you read. Seriously, like literally there's an item called pre-sliced bread, but it's BRED, which
because
means
it's not actual bread.
Yeah,
It's legally distinct from actual bread.
there's an animal called the breadworm.
Yeah, okay. I come on.
The bread is made of worms.
Yeah, let me finish.
Sorry.
Shipping children to vocational training only to never see their parents again, and many other vile tactics.
It's slavery. It's wage slavery. You call it a different thing. You smile while you do it. Okay, it's not as bad as chattel slavery, but it's still slavery. To deal with the extreme blow to worker morale, the board made a subsidiary called the Order of Scientific Inquiry, or OSI, to oversee an approved religion of Halcyon. The OSI instituted the religion of scientism, which dictated that the universe was created perfectly by a grand architect, and that everything had a reason for being the way it was. Each worker was considered to be living their path in life, and straying from your path or questioning the grand architect was heresy. They made their own. First of all, it sounds a lot like Scientology, which is funny because it's also a corporation.
But it's literally made to tell people, no, those feelings that maybe this isn't all you're meant to do with your life are dumb and stupid, and you need to push them away as much as possible because this is literally what you're supposed to be doing in life, working your life away until you die and pay for your grave.
I mean, obviously, this is more of an extreme, but I think a lot of real world orthodoxies essentially kind of did the same thing. Not really, they weren't reinforcing a corporate mindset, but they were reinforcing the mindset of the societies that they come from. You know, like think about like Christianity and feudalism, for example, right?
Yep. Any alternative religions to the OSI were banned by the board, and religions that suggested the universe was not the product of perfect order, and instead one generated out of chaos or anything against the current social order, were monikered as philosophism. All philosophist books and teachings were banned and confiscated by the OSI. Philosophy becomes a dirty word with this because you're not supposed to question philosophy. No one's supposed to be a philosophist. You're supposed to eat up what the OSI tells you and believe it unquestionably.
Yeah, like in this world, saying that you're a philosophist is like saying, it's like saying you have a tinfoil hat. That's the way that people look at you. Tartarus was established as a maximum security penal colony to incarcerate anyone that did not follow company protocol, could not work or pay to not work, or violated company rights.
Don't go on about this.
Why not?
We need to keep going.
We have time. Seriously, we have so much time.
There's still a lot more to go over.
We're over halfway through.
Oh, okay.
We have plenty of time.
Okay. Well, yeah, there's something called company rights, and it's companies' right to exploit their workers.
It's the whole corporations as people thing.
It's like stealing company time is to taken to the extreme. You know, like you aren't allowed to do anything that the company doesn't approve of.
By the way, the whole idea of stealing company time is completely ridiculous. Like, if you're a corporation, you're hiring someone, you're hiring a human being. That means you need to take into account human error and the fact that humans aren't as efficient as machines, which means you might have time that's less than efficient. Okay? And if you're like, well, what about they're on Facebook all day or whatever, then you fire them because they aren't as good workers, right? You don't like have a punitive system for like, oh, you stole time from us, because that implies you can litigate them for that. And no, that's garbage. No.
Yep.
Sorry.
It's okay. The Earth Minister sat by while all of this happened, happy to give his tacit approval. Eventually, the meanings of words began to change as the old definitions were forgotten, and history was never taught. For example, authentic changed from meaning genuine in origin to instead mean as close to the real thing as possible without being actually real. In addition, law changed from meaning a system of imposed rules to instead be an empty epithet used by exasperated workers in phrases like, oh, law.
Right. So they won't ever say, like, what?
Like, law isn't a thing.
Yeah, like, the concept of law is so alien to them that they go, oh, law, you're not a philosophist, are you?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It's so horrible. They just don't teach history. And I think this is an underrated thing, but corporations don't want you to know about history. Like, I've worked for corporations that were all like, oh, it's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Let's celebrate all he did for diversity. It's like, you realized he was a democratic socialist, right? Mm-hmm. You realize he was a democratic socialist and would oppose everything you stand for.
Yep.
Please. Meanwhile, there was a mutiny among the crew of the Hope when they ran out of rations, led by some who had started to eat the bodies of the people in stasis to survive. Those that refused fought back until the entire crew had died.
October 23rd, 2320.
October 23rd? That's a reference to Fallout.
I guarantee you it is.
It is, because this date appears in the intro.
Yeah. The Hope eventually arrived in the Halcyon system 26 years late. The board discovered it, drifting in space, but the people within it had been in stasis too long and couldn't be recovered.
Phineas Wells was one of the board's top scientists and an expert on cryogenic stasis. They had him research how to revive the people aboard the Hope, but they had been in stasis too long and couldn't be recovered. He failed to revive anyone, and the board considered the venture a lost cause. Wells refused to give up, and killed many Hope colonists as he failed to revive them again and again. For refusing to obey and give up, the board declared him a terrorist, and Wells went into hiding in the Charybdis cluster.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, or he kind of had like an epiphany of like, maybe saving people is better than working for these corporate people.
Yep.
Even though he has failed to save anyone, so he has like these hypothetical ethics.
Yeah, he just really thinks that the people aboard the Hope shouldn't have been given up on. He doesn't want to give up on them. He thinks they're worth something as people.
And the board's giving up on them because it's not profitable.
Mm-hmm. December 5th, 2320, the board decided to cover up the Hope's existence. They moved the ship into orbit the backside of Typhon near the edge of the system. And by this point, it's an urban folk tale.
Yeah, because they covered it up, so they don't teach history. People just don't know about it.
It was a huge news story when they first arrived, and a huge thing in their history that people just eventually forgot.
History just isn't a thing. Actually, that's kind of why Outer Worlds is going to be a one and done thing, at least for now, until we decide to cover it again. We can do the whole storyline in one episode of our podcast because we just don't know a lot of it. Mm-hmm. You know, we were able to talk a lot about like the 1890s, and then there's kind of a gap in the next 2 centuries, almost. So it's because they obfuscate history. It's intentional. Mm-hmm. And I kind of respect Obsidian for what they've done here with the story and showing that. Mm-hmm. It also is a good way for a smaller company to have to do less work. But look, I get it.
It also is a way to give them room to expand on the story later if they want to.
I really hope they do. Mm-hmm. I really hope they do. In time, as generations died and were replaced, even those in power cycled out, though usually only being replaced through nepotism. Charles Rockwell, the CEO of UDL, became the chairman of the board. Aloysius Clark became the Earth Minister.
However, Rockwell didn't want to actually do any work at managing the colony, and he handed most of his work to his assistant, Sophia Akande, making her act on his behalf as an adjutant. Thus, even though Rockwell was the most powerful man in Halcyon, he had given Adjutant Conde the power to shape the colony as she saw fit. She was a pragmatist, not a capitalist, able to exert her influence secretly as long as the shares owned by Rockwell and the rest of the board kept increasing.
She's such a complicated character. I mean, she kind of represents like the shadow government kind of idea, but only if we're talking about governments as corporations. Mm-hmm. I think what she represents is how, like, the richest CEOs of all the companies in the world, like Jeff Bezos and whatnot, like
they don't actually do anything.
Well, yeah, who is he beholden to? Like the secret backroom meetings of corporations that might be working together, you know, like for price fixing or forming trusts, you know, that kind of thing, right? Because this is a world, or Halcyon, they're just out in the open with most of it. Mm-hmm. But as we've seen, they're still willing to cover things up and have secrets. And here's another secret. A woman has been given ultimate power to use as long as she toes the company line. Mm-hmm. I think it's an interesting dichotomy between how, like, oftentimes the majority of the actual work of companies are not made by the people in charge, but the people they delegate to. Mm-hmm. I think that's an important statement.
Yeah.
But I do think it's problematic that the character with the most power in this game is not the rich white man CEO, although technically he is. He is the most powerful man. Mm-hmm. But he's delegated that power to a black woman.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that.
Well, it wouldn't be so bad if they didn't just ignore race. Like, if they would have talked about how, like, oh, this was considered a huge step. It was a thing that they used.
Oh, if it was like a false progressive kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That could have been an interesting
thing. Where she was their token black woman. And since Jeremy Rockwell works with the black woman, would have been.
Or I think if they had just portrayed her more sympathetically, because I really feel like she might just be like, this is my job. I was a secretary. I just happened to be a secretary to the most powerful man in the company.
And if she doesn't do her job, she'll land in Tartarus and someone else will come up and do it.
Or even like, she's like, I never had a shot at power. He just kind of gave it to me. Was I gonna say no?
Yeah, and that too.
I think if they had made that more explicit, it would have been a better story. I think it would have been more progressive. Mm-hmm. But I do like to interpret it that way because they didn't really comment much on it.
Yep.
And she specifically says she's not a capitalist. She only supports capitalism because her masters tell her to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She would be a dictator if she could.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, plagues began to become more frequent in the poorest parts of Halcyon.
Not the plagues.
Especially in the Space's Choice Company town of Edgewater. The official statement from Space's Choice on the plagues was that they were caused by low morale and not working hard enough.
Literally, they would prescribe working harder. They had these, like, slogans. Oh, the thing with slogans, people don't realize how powerful slogans are. Slogans aren't just something catchy. They're a replacement for critical thinking. Imagine any political argument you've ever had with someone. Now imagine you're actually trying to take a stance like, I think this thing is right because of these reasons, and here are the stats, and that's why the alternative is wrong, right? And then your opponent goes, but zing-da-da, you know, like, just like captured phrase. What's a good one? But Venezuela. There's one, right? Mm-hmm. But the stock market. Or what? Can you help me think of one? There's always a bigger fish.
Yeah.
Or you did it too. You know, these phrases, these idioms, these slogans, they replace thought. They replace critical thought. Because most of the time, you don't say those things when you don't say that being like, no, seriously, compare and contrast your ideology of socialism and what Venezuela claims is socialism. I'd genuinely like to know the difference, because if yours matches theirs too much, I'm not going to be happy about that. Do you think that's really what they're asking?
Yeah, yeah.
No, they're just like, no, shut it down. I don't want to talk to you about this. And their mind's made up and they're not willing to listen to reason. That's what slogans do. And when you take away language and history, that's all these workers have. They're told work makes you healthy. Do you remember the slogan they used exactly?
I don't know.
It's like work harder and live longer or something like that.
I don't know.
But it
was something about work invigorating the spirit.
That's what it was. Yeah. Work invigorates the spirit.
Yeah.
Hard work invigorates the spirit.
Yeah, and that is justification for it. If your spirit is healthy, then your body will be healthy. You know, they use that whole mind and body thing where work invigorates the spirit and that keeps you healthy. Like
corporations do, it's individualism used at your fault. If you didn't do good enough, or if you're not doing well enough, it's your fault because you didn't work hard enough. Literally taken to an anti-scientific means of sickness. Oh my goodness. And we're in the coronavirus pandemic now. I don't mean to keep bringing it up, but people are literally talking about just throwing people to the wolves for the stock market. Literally.
Yeah.
By the time this episode comes out, I don't even know what's gonna... Akande discovered, however, that the plagues were in truth simply malnutrition. All of the food grown and produced on the terraformed planets in the Halcyon system had diminishing returns on nutrition, becoming less potent with each generation, to the point that people were nearly starving with full stomachs. I think you only find this out near the end of the game. It's one of the big twists. And it just, to me, it's the entire message that Obsidian was trying to make with this game. Corporations are fundamentally bad at survival. Simply. I mean, look how many people said that the country should be run like a business. Did that work?
Nope.
It's what got us into the pandemic.
And it's not what's going to get us out of it.
And, people call China communist. And I'm like, China's more corporate than we are. So, next, I guess.
Akande told Rockwell and the board of what she had learned. The secret of the plagues became yet another proprietary secret, as they covered up any word of it. They left Akande to make a plan to save Halcyon, while the board relied upon interstellar trading with other star systems so that they could hoard proper food for themselves.
You don't hear about the other star systems, the other colonies, very much, because the board's the only one with interstellar trips to go visit them.
They're the only one with, enough resources to make those trips.
Yeah. 2342. When interstellar trade started to die down as other colonies lost interest in trading with Halcyon, the board became concerned at the scarcity of interstellar freighters. They sent a frigate loaded with half of the UDL military to Earth to trade with them directly, though the trip would take 10 years.
Gangs of raiders and pirates became more frequent around Halcyon as the board failed to provide for them. Many outlaws were people unwilling to work. However, a group known as marauders were a byproduct of the side effects of Adrena time. People who overly used the Spacer's Choice drug found themselves having psychotic episodes, and these people who were overtly hostile to others have become known as marauders.
I love this, by the way.
Yeah, I love that there's actually an explanation. I love that there's actually an explanation. Because, even in the Fallout games, they're raiders, They're out of their minds on chemicals or whatever, but there's no real cause of it.
I definitely think any game should have a justification for why you shoot people. Because so many games just have it as an assumption, you're just going to be a mass murderer killing hundreds of people. And I've never been comfortable with that. So just give me some type of justification. And a lot of people play Outer Worlds thinking that, oh, Outer Worlds, you did the same thing. I expected better of you. Why are there just random marauders? Right?
Until you.
But if you specifically do the marauder hunting quest,
The bounty.
Yes, you only find out at the end that it was actually the whole thing was a side effect of the drug that they produce.
Yeah, it was great because when we were doing the bounties, you said that to me. You're like, why are we just randomly killing these people? Why are they all overtly hostile? And then we got back and turned them all in. And she told us that it had one of the side effects of the drug was violent psychosis.
I never took the drug again after that. I don't think they actually programmed that in. You're not going to become a marauder. But I just didn't feel comfortable taking it anymore.
Yeah, because adrenatime is pretty...
addictive.
Yes, but it's also like you have a choice whether to take it or not. There's regular Adrena.
I know.
That's what you have to take for health, so...
Right. But so anyway, like anytime I see a comment being like, oh, Outer Worlds just has random and humans you have to shoot, they don't even have an explanation. I'm like, you didn't get far enough into the game, did you? However, they don't really have a similar justification with the Outlaws, and that is disappointing.
Well,
like
I think what it is people forced into banditry.
I don't care. If when you go to the Charybdis cluster, there's a lot of outlaws there, and unless you're like pro board and when you're playing the game, they should not be immediately hostile to you, but they are.
Yeah, that's
why?
true.
Maybe they assume you're pro board. It's never told you, and so I guess there you go. That was disappointing. But the Marauders are far more common, and they actually have an explanation.
Mm-hmm. Sublight was an independent company started by Lilia Hagen on the Groundbreaker that was a thinly veiled front for piracy. Hagen would kill to survive and then cover it up with paperwork, but she also secretly believed the board to be covering up contact with aliens.
It's an interesting thing because despite all the space travel, no one's ever encountered aliens. But also, it's not profitable to look for them. Just saying. But Sublight being an independent company is interesting. So now there's a company independent of Halcyon.
Yep.
January 12th, 2343. After decades of lost productivity in human lives due to the sulfur in the air of Terra 1 that the board had always denied existing, the board finally relented and declared the planet a total loss. They made the hazard clause public, a part of a previously made contract between the corporations that laid out an evacuation plan in the event that a planet became uninhabitable. The board claimed that they invoked the hazard clause because of the monstrous wildlife on the planet, not because of the sulfur.
By the way, sulfur smells like rotting eggs. So literally the air on this planet just stinks everywhere.
The logic was backwards too. It'd be like, Factory Unit 413, why have you not created your product yet? Well, the machine broke down because of the sulfur in the air. We need a new machine part. You are not due for a machine part for 13 years. Why isn't yours working? Because of the sulfur in the air. The word sulfur is not recognized and your message has not been sent. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Graham Bryant was a writer for MSI's product catalog who thought this was an opportunity to be free of the corporations. He tipped off some pirates to the location of MSI's executives in Amber Heights, and the pirates invaded the town, massacring everyone inside of it.
For the record, this is portrayed as a horrible thing he did. I actually agree with him.
Well, it's not just the executives. That's why they portray it as a horrible thing, is it wasn't just them. There were innocent bystanders, and that's what they're concerned about.
And that's unfortunate, but at worst, that makes it a mixed bag.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. But you gotta be honest with how they saw it.
Considering the state of this colony, getting rid of a corporate tyranny, I don't blame him.
Yeah, I don't blame him either.
With the executives of MSI murdered, Graham and his friend Sanjar Nandi were the highest-ranking people in MSI left. Graham left MSI to spread philosophism and founded a group of anarchists called the Iconoclasts, but Sanjar believed he could salvage MSI and took the title of CEO. The friction between these two characters is one of the most interesting in the entire game. Mm-hmm. And the endings do not do it justice.
July 12, 2343, the hazard clause went into effect. Many corporations began evacuating, but in doing so, many people were left behind to fend for themselves in an effort to cut losses.
Yep, just literally left people.
Yeah.
Under Sanjar's leadership, MSI decided to take advantage of a loophole in the hazard clause that would allow a corporation to retain full ownership of a planet if they were the only one currently habitating it. Therefore, MSI did not evacuate Terra 1, and they claimed the planet for themselves, renaming it Monarch.
While MSI's acquisition had been fully legal, the other corporations felt betrayed and ejected MSI off the board, making it independent of the Halcyon Holdings Corporation.
Aw, you felt betrayed, Will Corporation!
Shush. The board respected the name change of the planet to Monarch, but they went further and erased all history of the name Terra 1 until everyone in the colony not on Monarch forgot that Terra 1 ever existed. The board relocated onto Terra 2 and expanded the city of Byzantium to include their new headquarters.
I mean, when you start the game and you notice there's a Terra 2 and not a Terra 1, like, I legitimately thought, like, oh, Terra 1 must have just been, like, Earth or something, you know? There's just such a lack of information.
Yep.
Sanjar came to the realization that unchecked capitalism simply didn't work. Whoa.
Keep reading.
And that regulation and workers' rights were necessary for any corporation to function long-term without conquest. With that mindset, he reformed MSI to give workers sick leave, holidays, weekends, and fair pay, and he received data that proved MSI was more productive than ever, though the harsh environment on Monarch provided a constant challenge.
Yeah, he basically, he was a nice guy. So he took advantage of being the CEO.
Sanjar is the one CEO that gets to stay. Honestly, I love his character. I think he's really cool. He's the nice capitalist. I think he's interesting. Mm-hmm. I think he's also dangerous because he's not going to run the company forever.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Meanwhile, the iconoclasts grew in number, with many people who had been left behind on Monarch joining them. Their two most famous members were Graham, who preached philosophism, and Zora Blackwood, a notorious field medic that used to work for Rizzo's.
You know me, I just used to work for that soda corporation. Oh, what'd you do? You don't want to know. The board continued aggressively pursuing ownership of the Groundbreaker as well, preying upon the lack of resources and needs of the Mardettes running the ship, increasing their influence with each concession, resulting in the Groundbreaker becoming more neoliberal each time. Mm-hmm. There's ads everywhere.
Yep. Akande, now in Byzantium, began preparing for the future of Halcyon with a plan called the Lifetime Employment Program. She ordered tests to be made, using workers as test subjects to solve the explosive cell death problem with long-term stasis so that people could be stored indefinitely. Hundreds of workers were experimented upon.
Yeah, there's literally a choice in the game where they're like, oh, if you take this chemical to revive the Hope colonists, you'll kill all the people that have been experimented on so far. I'm like, I'm putting them out of their misery. It's not even a choice.
Yeah.
When Minister Clark discovered some of the secrets that the board had been covering up, he was horrified. He wanted to notify the Earth Directorate to request military intervention in this humanitarian crisis, but the board wasn't going to let that happen. Rockwell locked Clark in his mansion and stationed guards around it. He forced Clark to televise propaganda approving of every board decision. The government's a puppet. Mm-hmm. That's all they are.
2352. Halcyon sent and received messages from Earth, but suddenly the messages stopped. The frigate that the board sent over was never seen again, and neither anyone on Earth nor the frigate ever replied to the board's messages. Communication with Earth had gone dark, and UDL had permanently lost half its military.
There's no explanation for this. This is a twist at the very end of the game
that you just find out that Earth went dark and nobody knows what happened to Earth.
You're on your own. Mm-hmm. I have some theories, though. May 15th, 2355. Having developed a new chemical formula to prevent explosive cell death, Wells infiltrated the Hope with the assistance of Captain Alex Hawthorne and attempted to revive a Hope colonist. He went through the records and revived a stranger, someone he thought might survive. Indeed, Wells was successful for the first time, and they survived.
And this is where the game begins.
And you get to make all the choices. I wanted to say something though. The lifetime employment program is such backwards corporate speak. Like, I mean, it's a spoiler, but like later on in the game, when you finally meet the chairman,
This whole thing is a spoiler, pretty much.
I mean, it was self-evident.
Yeah.
But when you see the chairman, right? He tries to sell the program in corporate speak. Due to an unfortunate undervalue of nutrition within the current produce that Halcyon is providing, there is an unfortunate side effect in that we will all die. I mean, cut that, and like he takes it again. We will all stop living permanently. Fire whoever wrote this.
Because he tries to spin it.
Yeah, exactly. He tries to spin something that's just like so unspinnable.
Yeah. Because the truth is, they will all starve to death, and they're freezing the majority.
That's not a solution.
Yeah.
That's just prolonging. That's just kicking the can down the line. That's all corporations do is kick the can down.
Yep.
Anyway, theories on what happened to Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Some people think that Earth was destroyed.
Possible, but doubted. At least not by any outside influences.
Well, nuclear war could still happen.
Yeah, I was thinking that possibly there was a big conflict that happened on Earth after the ships left that nobody found out about until
Well, no,
Earth went dark.
they still had telecommunication. It wouldn't have happened until 2352.
Oh, okay. Well, then it happened like months before they received their last message, because it takes so long for them to get a message that could have happened before.
Yeah, it takes about 9 months to send or receive.
Yeah, so I think that maybe 9 months before they received the last message was when they actually went dark.
Okay, but I think they must have had some type of socialist revolution.
Oh, you think so?
Oh.
But no, but because if they did, why wouldn't they try to save the colonies?
Well,
Why wouldn't they reach out to the people on the colonies?
I don't think they could. I think Halcyon is so hyper ultra capitalist. I mean, they literally picked a system.
Yes, but they would have had to completely give up on
Can I
contact.
finish what I'm saying?
Sorry.
They literally picked a system on the edge of the known universe. And they settled as far away from Earth as they could possibly get. They wanted nothing to do with Earth anymore, except for trade. But the other colonies weren't trading with them as much anymore. You know, they tried trading with Earth. I think Halcyon was being shut out. I think when most of the giant corporations left Earth, it left Earth vulnerable to a people's takeover.
Oh, that's possible, I guess. That they just decided to cut them off because they knew there wasn't, like, it's very possible that there were people there who just knew that there was no way to get to the people of the colonies, that they would have to send a message and it would have had to be read by someone super high up, and that there was no way that they would ever be able to save them. So why try speaking to capitalists?
Yeah, I think it was really more like, we can't stop you. We're not going to go to war with you, but we're not doing this anymore. Bye.
Yeah, that's yeah.
However, such a thing could only happen with violence. That's why I think it has to be a socialist revolution. Because, first of all, the state of the Earth's government, the Earth director, would have to change. And two, there was that military ship that was sent to them. I think they commandeered it. I think that might have been a fight that might have happened. There might have been literally a war between the half of the UDL military that showed up and the Earth's own force.
Maybe.
Because otherwise, what happened to UDL's military? Why didn't they even just...
Maybe they defected to Earth once they saw how much better Earth was than Halcyon.
I mean, it's possible. I doubt it, but it's possible. I think if anything,
Well, it would be easy for them to just be like, you know what? Screw this. I'm done. I'm not going back to Halcyon.
but they still have commanders and generals
Yes.
that are indoctrinated into the corporate ideology.
Yes, but they're so far away, they would have no consequences.
No, they would fight to the death.
Well, maybe some of them would, yeah.
The leaders of them would, and they would try to make their lackeys do it.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I think, because you have to keep in mind, it's not just that ship disappeared, but they never even sent a message back being like, hey, so something happened with Earth. Why not? Because they might have all been embroiled in a conflict and not have been able to send such a message.
Yeah,
and
possibly.
And anyone that was left chose to ghost Halcyon.
Yeah, fair
And considering Halcyon, they deserve to be ghosted. Not the people there, obviously, but the people might have been seen as a lost cause.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that's where the hero comes in to save all them. All right, we've been going on this too long. This game is amazing.
Yeah, it was really good.
Maybe we'll have to come up with an excuse to talk about it sometime later. Hopefully there's DLC and that'll be it.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right, well, I've been Kyle.
I'm Kira.
This has been Game Theorem. We have a Twitter account, Game Theorems, with the @ in front of all that. Okay, bye.
Bye.